चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहु पुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर्गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्।
So in our previous session, we were discussing about how to be a sadhaka, how to be an ardent practitioner of yoga. I have chosen this subject because both of these talks are an offering to Guruji. And when he came here for the last time and was sitting here, just behind me, he's still sitting there, he's sitting everywhere. He chose to speak on this subject. And as part of his talk, if you haven't already seen his talk, which is there on our website, a transcription of it, I'll just summarize a few important points and then proceed from there. First of all, he spoke about 4 types of practices. The first one he referred to as Shodhana Kriya, which means practices that are done to search, to experiment. Because Shodhana means to experiment, to search, searching practices, in which we search and look at the different possibilities that yoga can give us. Even when we concentrate on asana, then we search, we research. Can use the word research for that. Shodhana Kriya. That's the first step. These are technical words, but coined by himself. They are not words which one can find in Sanskrit texts, yogic texts. It is a technical terminology that he coined himself based on his experience. So practices that contain an approach of research, searching out the different possibilities. Then the second one he called Shoshana Kriya. Shoshana Kriya means practices which dry out. He translated them as purificatory practices, practices which dry out the impurities of the body, of the breath, of the mind. Such practices he referred to as shoshana kriya, purificatory practices. Then the third group of practices that he referred to are known as, which he used the Sanskrit word for them, shobhana kriya, beautifying practices. Practices in which a person practices to beautify the body, to beautify the breath, to beautify the mind, to make one's thoughts beautiful. So that's that artistic approach in which a person goes into the details and has an artistic approach to the practice of yoga, tries to create and bring out something that is aesthetically beautiful on the level of the body, on the level of breath, on the level of the mind, the thoughts. And then the last one he referred to as shobhana kriya, which means, shamana kriya, which means pacifying practices. Practices which render the body completely still, pacify the breath, and then eventually also pacify the mind. And it was in this context that he then also speaks of shavasana, and then of course the deeper meditative practices for which shavasana is a preparation by which one means the deeper meditative practices explained as part of yoga. So, to bring elements of each one of these kriyas, each one of these actions, each one of these practices into one's practice, that seems to be essentially his idea of being a sadhaka. Sort of, if I would try, who am I to summarize? But I was here, I was listening to his lecture, I was the one who transcribed it and then made it a little bit more clear before it got published in Yoga Rahasya. So I have been with it for a while back then as well as again this time. So that's my understanding, that's my summarization. But let me also just quote my favorite passages from his talk so that you can actually hear his very words. So the first one is the opening passage, and the second passage is the closing passage. And both passages are extremely beautiful. So, as you are all sadhakas, that's how I felt. Well, hope so. Hope so, all of us sitting in this room. But that's the hope that he had to those to whom he came when he came here to this group of yoga practitioners here in Rishikesh, in the world capital of yoga, he hoped. So he assumes that as you are all sadhakas, which means spiritual practitioners, don't be abhyasis, which means merely practitioners. There is a vast difference between a practitioner known as an abhyasi and a sadhaka. You should be a sadhaka and not just an abhyasi. Even though Patanjali starts with the word abhyasa, which means practice, which is mechanical, because first of all he wants people to get mechanically accustomed to the subject at hand, but then he says that we cannot remain abhyasis forever. We have to evolve. We have to go further and become a sadhaka, become an ardent practitioner. A sadhaka needs sadhana, inner practice. Abhyasa does not need so much inner effort, but a sadhaka has to make a great inner effort to reach there, to achieve through sadhana what it gives us. I like this approach very, very much, which many of us sometimes fail to grasp, that rather than asking from yoga what we want, be receptive to what yoga is ready to offer us, what yoga is ready to give us. When rather than being willing to get from the tree what we want, but being receptive to what the tree can give us. That's sort of the approach that he has here, to achieve through sadhana what it gives to us and not what we want. I think this line I like very much, because ultimately what I've seen is that often it takes a lot of time and a lot of growth before we even actually know what we really want. And what we want, otherwise, before that growth, many times what we really want is a tiny little fraction than what yoga can really offer. And by wanting that much only, we sometimes tend to limit what yoga can actually offer us. So I liked this approach very much, and it was for this sentence that I included this paragraph.
It was to say, yoga is teaching me.
Yes, yoga is teaching me. That's the very basic idea, also which Vyasa explains, that as a person, just today morning I came across a wonderful example. Now I'm completely blank. It was a wonderful example from daily life, how there are things that cannot be taught, but when a person actually does them, then by doing it, we know further what to do. The same thing is about yoga. Yes. Therefore, let me tell you the quality of a sadhaka. This was his opening passage. And then his closing passage is also very inspiring. Even today, I practice 6 hours a day. And this was when he came here in 2011. He was, I think, 94 years old? Yeah, 94 years old. So even today, I practice 6 hours a day. Keep that in mind. I am not at all an armchair yogi. If I stand here, I'm like on fire. And I could really feel that. In his presence there was tremendous strength, tremendous energy. The mind is contained of Tejas Tattva, which means fire element. That Tejas Tattva is still simmering in me. Thank you very much, but practice regularly. My love to all of you. Labor with love and laugh in failures. Laugh in failures. That's again very beautiful. Don't feel alone or dejected in the moments of failures. Accept that failure as a light for you to make another attempt so that you will reach what you have wanted to reach. So laugh in failure and cry in success, but don't accept. By which I mean don't accept success too soon. So these were his closing passages. To summarize once again, the rest of what he spoke about was basically about being mindful, being completely aware of every part of the body. And then, of course, when we speak, he started speaking about Annamaya Kosha, which is this material layer of our being, but then similar mindfulness, total attentiveness, awareness of also the deeper layers. So then he started speaking about the deeper layers. In a way, if a person can really understand the broadness and depth which he had in his talk here, it sort of really summarized the whole system of yoga, and particularly his understanding of the system of yoga. It's talk worth reading through, even if we don't understand everything, but the spirit can be grasped very easily. So it is this subject that he wanted to speak about, how to be a sadhaka. And so I chose this subject for both of my talks. Last time I spoke about the deeper philosophical aspect of it. This time I want to speak a little bit about the practical aspect of it, which are very basic things, but sometimes it is very important to come down to the basics. What Guruji spoke about is our very, very advanced thing. He was speaking from his own level, but I want to speak from a very basic level, from a very practical level. So last time, that is what I did. Briefly, I will continue further from there. To achieve what we spoke about last time, about that equality, about being good, about transcending suffering through transcending ignorance, etc., the fundamental causes of suffering, by finding the light of wisdom within ourselves, to be able to do something regularly with total attentiveness, all these things that we talked about, and then ultimately non-violence as the very central idea of the 5 yamas and niyamas, and then giving also importance to the last 3 niyamas. That is all that I explained in my previous talk, but how to translate it into one's practical life? Because to translate it into one's practical life, some lifestyle changes are required. And why are they required? See, how do they benefit? The yogic masters very often speak of the mind as a constantly flowing river. And it is not only the mind, but it is also the breath, which is a constantly flowing river, ever renewing itself. Breathing itself is a purificatory practice, because through breathing, to a great extent, we get rid of, for example, the carbon dioxide which has accumulated in our blood. And we renew it, we refresh it through oxygen. So it is already, the natural breathing is already a purificatory practice, but we can take it further as a purificatory practice for our emotions and for our thoughts, for our mind. In fact, the masters say that pranayama is that fire which burns away all the impurities of the senses and of the mind. So this prana is also like a continuously flowing breath. And if we come even to the physical level, to the level of this body, which seems so static and nothing, at least when we look at somebody's body, nothing seems like a flowing river in it. But still, if we would look with an inner eye, with the eye of the mind, with the eye of understanding, we realize, in fact, how much this body is constantly changing. And today, with our scientific understanding, with modern science, in fact, they have carefully analyzed how much within the body changes and how much time it takes. And at the end of it, you actually ask yourself that how at all can I be the same person that I was a few years ago? Everything has radically changed, even within this physical body. And that's why it is better to look at this body like a continuously flowing river. And when a river flows, then naturally impurities come into it, depending on the environment in which it flows through. These impurities can exist on physical level, as well as on emotional level, as well as on the level of thoughts, the mind, and one's understanding. So a tremendous attempt has to be made to get rid of these impurities on the level of all these 3 rivers. And the lifestyle change that yogic masters suggest or recommend which can be referred to as the ideal recommended lifestyle changes, they are for the purpose so that we can purify these three constantly flowing rivers. Because they constantly flow, they also become impure, and because of that, they can also be purified. Because when the water becomes stale, you cannot purify it. But ever-flowing water can be kept clean and pure with some effort. So it is this effort that the yogic masters speak of. Just to add a little bit to the spirit of a yogic practitioner, about which Yajnavalkya, also a great yogin, speaks about the spirit of listening carefully what is being taught. And that doesn't mean that believe it simply because somebody says it. Don't believe it. The Buddha was, for example, was very clear, never believe something because I have said it. And the same approach should be there. Don't just listen first. Listen. Listening means to listen with awareness, with attentiveness. That's already a kind of meditation, because it is a kind of dharana. It is a kind of retention. We are retaining our awareness, our attention to what is being said. And we are not allowing our mind to waver here and there. So it is already a very basic practice of dharana. We have just chosen what the instructor is saying. We have chosen it as an object of our mental retention. Shravana. But then the second step is not to believe everything. Yes, fine, that is the teacher's experience. But does it make sense to me? We are two different individuals, deeply interconnected. In the depths of our being, yes, we are one. But on the outer layers, on the physical layers, on the layers of the mind, we are radically different from each other. Maybe because he or she too is a human being. What she's saying might be applicable to me or may be not. So for that, we have to engage with what we have heard critically. And that's what is known as critical analysis, manana. Does it make sense? Is it logical? Does it make sense to me from the correct level, my correct level? Many times, many things don't make sense on our correct level of understanding. As we grow further, they start making sense. So if something doesn't make sense, we let it be. Fine, let it be for the future. Let me stick with what makes complete sense to me. And let me try to practice that. Let me make myself better in that. Let me go deeper in that. That is the second thing, manana, critical analysis. And then once we are logically convinced that yes, this is logical, this makes sense, this is correct, then it is not enough. We know that so many theories are logically, through mathematics, through the principles of physics, they seem to be completely logical, but then they have to be tested. They have to be tested practically. And only after they are tested practically, and if the predicted result comes, that is when we can be 100% sure that yes, what is being said is completely true. And we didn't make a mistake. That is what in terms of yoga we call nididhyasana, experiential understanding. To then apply it practically in one's life, see its results, study its results, see its benefits or harms or whatever, and then we become fully convinced of what is being said. So, the journey of a sadhaka is from shravana into manana, and from manana into nididhyasana. Shravana, listening, manana, critical analysis, and nididhyasana, which means experiential understanding. But for this, some lifestyle changes have to be made, and in this I'm coming to the very practical aspect, because this is where I'm talking about this as an ideal thing, but sometimes I struggle myself. And it is the ideal that I want to achieve myself as a practitioner. It's a very simple ideal, but I'm talking about it because it appeals to me. Maybe it doesn't appeal to anybody else. That's completely your choice. But it includes some of the ideals presented by the yogic masters, how to start one's day. Because if we have a good start of our day, then the whole day becomes very beautiful. So the idea that the yogic masters always had is to be, because Surya Namaskara is about welcoming the sun. To be awake when the sun rises. To be in accordance to nature. We see nature, the birds, animals, they already arise a little bit before the sun. The moment the first ray of light comes, the birds start singing their beautiful songs. So the masters speak of these two praharas, which means 96. Each prahara consists of, two muhurtas. In Sanskrit we call them muhurta. One muhurta consists of what is the half of 96?
48.
48. Yeah, so each muhurta consists of 48 minutes. So to wake up approximately about 1.5 hours, 96 minutes before sunrise. And because the sunrise changes throughout the year, usually the routine that is followed in most of the ashrams here in Rishikesh is to wake up around 4 o'clock. Because in summer, that is approximately 1.5 hours before sunrise. So to wake up around at 4 o'clock. Because these early hours, at least, and that is my experience, whenever I'm able to wake up that early, sadly, not always on a regular level, regularly, but most of the times I do. And when I do, these morning hours, they are the most peaceful hours, they are the least distracting hours. Nobody distracts, then nobody gives a call usually in those early hours on the mobile. And nobody comes to visit. So you are completely to yourself. Whatever we do, whether it is asana practice, whether it is meditation, whether it is study, whatever we do has tremendous strength in it. It becomes a tremendous source of inspiration. And the day that follows, we feel that, yes, we have already done a lot. And then we can direct our attention to other things. It is completely in accordance to Mother Nature, because Mother Nature in those moments is preparing to welcome light, the source of life and light. And the same thing if we do within ourselves to prepare for the light of wisdom to arise, our attempt is in accordance to nature. And that's why Krishnamacharya, Guruji's teacher, who was the one who made Surya Namaskaras quite famous all over India, he used to say, wake up early in the morning and pray to the Lord. And if you don't want to pray to the Lord, if you don't want to do Namaskara to the Lord, then at least do namaskara to the sun, by which he meant Surya Namaskara. And even if you don't want to do Surya Namaskara, then at least do Namaskara to your parents. That's the least you can do, to your elders, so that at least learn something from them. So this is what he used to say. The yogic masters generally summarize the idea by saying they refer to this period as Brahma Muhurta, which means the greatest time of the day, or the time of the day which can be dedicated to the contemplation of Brahman pure consciousness. And what the masters there, Yajnavalkya, one of the great yogic masters, say, that wake up early in the morning and contemplate that which is beneficial to you. That is all what he says. Find out what is beneficial. Other masters say that analyze what you have done the previous day and think about it, how to improve on the mistakes that you have done the previous day, so that this may be the inspiration of all the actions of the day that is about to come. Whatever you have given or failed to give, whatever you have taught or failed to taught, whatever you learned or failed to learn, contemplate on that, think about it, use these moments to do that, and then see how the next day can be inspired by this and be made better through this. But for this, waking up early is extremely important. I know that today we speak often about personality types. Some personality types are morning people, some are afternoon people, some are evening people. I don't know how to incorporate this idea. I think that a lot more research is required. It seems that my personality type is a morning personality type. I work the best, at least mentally, I work the best in the morning. And that's why this routine is very appealing to me. I cannot speak on behalf of other personality types of which I have no experience, and I have no idea how to incorporate that into it. Maybe that requires additional research. So I'm not speaking about that. I'm ignorant of it. Then some dietary changes also, because what yogic masters say that when the intake is clean, ahara shuddhau, and of course for them intake was not only diet, food that we take in, of course that's a major component, but everything that we take in through our five senses of perception. Gradually purification has to come on every level. But what we take in particularly in the form of food, that's where our awareness should start. Are we aware of what we are eating? Do we look at the contents? Do we know what we are taking into ourselves? Do we understand the meaning of those contents? Do we understand the implication, the source? It requires tremendous understanding, but today with internet, with Google, so many of our questions can be answered, and we can eat responsibly. We can be responsible for what we are eating. We should learn, we should study about what we are eating. That is because, again, I spoke about tapas, which is usually translated as austerity, or taking upon oneself voluntary hardship. I spoke about this in my previous class, briefly. There are various ways to translate it into one's daily life. One of the translations that the yogic masters, the commentators of the Yoga Sutras have suggested is to eat what is beneficial in balanced amount, not in excess, not too much, not too little, and what is clean and pure. These three things, to look at the food and ask oneself, is it beneficial for me? Am I eating it because it is beneficial? Or am I eating it simply because it is tasty to my taste buds? Or is it really beneficial? That's the first question. If it's tasty, then am I eating too much, more than what I require? Or some people, they eat too little. So that also has to be avoided. And then, is it clean? Is it pure? If we have faith in the divine, then can it be offered? Is it something that can be offered to the divine? Is it fit to be offered? To stick to such food is also a form of tapas, is also a form of austerity. That's what the masters say. And for this they have, of course, divided foods in three categories. Tamasika food, food which makes us lazy and lethargic. That is the first category. Food that makes us hyperactive. That is the second category. That is known as Rajasika food. And food that keeps us balanced. Neither makes us lazy and lethargic, heavy, nor makes us hyperactive. That is known as Sattvika food. The list can be found in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna has beautifully listed the properties of Tamasika food, of Rajasika food, and of Sattvika food. Today the time is limited, so I will not go through it. The Bhagavad Gita is easily accessible to everyone. It is, I think, the 8th, 9th, and the 10th verse of the 17th chapter, in which Krishna lists the three types of foods. Also, another suggestion that the masters give is because for them slowly, every aspect of our life through mindfulness becomes a form of worship. A yogi doesn't need to go into a temple or in a sacred space to worship. Whatever he does, whatever he or she does, when he does it with total awareness, when he does it with complete mindfulness, then that act itself becomes a form of worship. And in this spirit, what we find in the yogic tradition says that there is, for example, just to give an example, what happens here in places like Rishikesh and in all over India, is that we recite some mantras before we start eating food. And these mantras are very simple, because what they actually make us aware of, that this food which I am eating is a manifestation of consciousness. The hand or the spoon through which I am eating, that too is a manifestation of that consciousness. The one that is eating and gaining nourishment, that too is a manifestation of consciousness. Ultimately, the enjoyer enjoying this food is a manifestation of consciousness. And the fire within me, which digests the food, which in yoga is known as Vaishvanara Agni, the universally beneficial fire, the fire that burns in the stomach of all living beings and digests their food and then nourishes them. That fire, Vaishvanara fire as it is referred to in yoga, to become aware that it is the same universal light out there, physical light, physical heat, which is present within myself and which is nourishing me. And therefore, this food which I am offering is in a sense not at all different from the fire sacrifices that you see being done in temples, the most ancient method of worship in India, in Iran, and I think even when I, for example, with my limited understanding of the Old Testament, when I read about the temples of Jerusalem and that ever-burning fire there and how offerings were made into the fire, we see that this offering into fire has been a universal practice of all the different traditions. And the same method of worship is taking place when I'm eating. And then that food becomes in itself a method of worship of that omnipresent divinity when that awareness is there. And since yoga is to do everything with awareness, these mantras, if we recite them in the beginning with understanding, then they make us aware of this truth. So that is the prayer that we find: Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhina. Then such a person who does all his actions in the awareness of that Brahman, that pure consciousness, he attains Brahman, that pure consciousness, in his life. So already the goal, and that's the purpose for which I'm nourishing my body through this food. And then Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva, I, in the form of Vaishvanara, which is present within my stomach, Praninam Deham Ashritaha, I am present in the stomach of all beings, and I am digesting all types of foods and nourishing them through that fire into which I am offering this food. So it is a beautiful practice of mindfulness, a beautiful practice of awareness which can be incorporated into one's daily routine. It should not become a mechanical practice, which it becomes, at least for a while. But then when we think, then slowly and slowly, first of all, yes, it is fine if it's just a mechanical practice. I see it with so many people. It's just a mechanical practice. Just very fast, and let us eat. Nobody even thinks of their meaning. But maybe one day that awareness comes, and then it becomes a deeper practice. That is the difference between practitioner and sadhaka. A practitioner does it simply because it's the rule in our ashram. A sadhaka does it because he knows the deeper understanding. Often the masters speak also of vegetarian diets, simply because, as I said, that ahimsa, the practice of non-violence, is very central to the practice of yoga. On deeper levels, the principle of non-violence has to manifest as universal friendliness, compassion, joyfulness, and forgiveness. These four practices that Patanjali speaks of. But if the foundation of non-violence is absent, then how can one then develop it further into friendliness, compassion, joyfulness, and forgiveness? Through meditation. Therefore, ahimsa, as a foundational practice, includes, and that's why the yogic traditions, even though Hindu traditions generally have been, there was animal sacrifice part of ancient Hindu traditions, some traditions at least, but yogic traditions have always condemned also that aspect. Like the Buddha, the yogic traditions have always stood up against animal sacrifice, as well as attempting to lead as much a non-violent life as possible. Again, the yogic masters say that it is very natural for human beings to engage in consuming meat, in drinking liquor. This is exactly what I'm quoting Manu's words. He says it is very natural activity for human beings to engage in eating meat, in drinking liquor, and in physical relationships. That's very natural for humanity. But the more a person abstains, the more strength they attain from within. So it should not be understood as something that is being imposed, that this is how it has to be. And depending on circumstances in this world, from places to places, how much can a person practice non-violence depends very much on cultural and social circumstances. But at least to take steps into that direction. If we are eating meat, then why not to reduce the amount, at least to start with? Just to gradually, even radical moving away sometimes has negative effects to somebody's body who has grown up eating meat all their lives. But at least gradually, a person, just as an attempt to reduce the suffering of those who have to die. And like this, how far can a person take it? Today we live in an era when the movement of veganism is so much being talked about. There are negative and positive views of that. But when I look at the lives of the ancient yogis, when I see that one of the very definitions of a Muni, and Patanjali was called Mahamuni, the great Muni. The Buddha is referred to often as Mahamuni. One of the definitions of a Muni, which means a contemplative, is someone who, at least as part of his lifestyle, avoids eating meat, avoids consuming liquor, and even honey. So honey, because at least in ancient India, it required the total destruction of the honeycomb, and many bees used to get killed, or at least the children, I don't know how to call it, who could not fly away because of the smoke, they used to get killed. So it was part of their non-violent practice. Some, not all, but some who saw milk and milk products as a great luxury and as part of tapas, even tried to avoid that. So already these seemingly modern ideas of veganism were being experimented in antiquity by the yogis. The question is always, we have to ask ourselves, how far can I take it? Some of them, like you just asked me about the Vaisheshika philosophy, yes, it was you who asked me about the Vaisheshika philosophy, the great atomistic philosopher of India, the master of the Vaisheshika philosophy, Kanada, was one of these munis who practiced what is known as Shiloncha vritti, which means sustenance only through what naturally falls to the ground, by thus not even inflicting suffering on plants by ripping away their fruits, which we do usually. But they would be patient, and would the grains to completely dry out and fall, let them fall. When they are completely dried, only then they would consume. Similarly, usually when a fruit is ripe, then it falls to the ground. So it is, or I've seen that you just have to touch it a little bit. Just give it a touch and it falls into your hands. As if, urvarukamiva bandhanat, like in this Trayambak Mahamrityunjaya mantra. When urvaruka, cucumber is completely ripe, it leaves the stem on its own. Similarly, when a fruit is completely ready, then you don't have to pull it away. Just give it a touch and it falls into your hands. So they... Yes?
I remember when I came first time to India, when I was staying in Brindavani Ashram, Oh, he had a beautiful orange tree, full of fruits, but we were not allowed to take it. We only were allowed to take what was
Fallen to the
fallen
ground.
on the ground.
Beautiful.
We were not allowed to pluck it.
Pluck it.
But we were allowed
Yes,
to
that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. See, so it is these levels that some of the ancient, these extremes, they could be, you could call them extremes, that they have gone to these extremes of non-violence where they were even being considerate of plants. Whether we are willing or we have the strength to go to those extremes, that is our choice. But at least I think this, even just the information should inspire us to at least make choices which are less environmentally destructive, to be more considerate of the environment, of our rainforests, of our trees, and try to at least lead a life that is less destructive to the environment. When I was working on one of the last projects of George Feuerstein, a great author of yoga who gave the Encyclopedia of Yoga and many, many great books. Both of these projects, unfortunately, didn't finish. We couldn't finish them because then he died from cancer. But in our discussions, all discussions were online. We didn't really meet in person. But the discussions that we had, he was, towards the end of his life, very much passionate about green yoga, what he called green yoga. And it is one of his last books, Green Yoga, and then the same he wrote from a Buddhistic perspective. So 2 books, Green Yoga and Green Dharma. Because he realized later that Buddhists are less inclined to read a book on yoga, so that's why then he wrote it again from a Buddhistic perspective, Green Dharma. To show that how in our modern times the teachings of yoga can inspire us to lead what he called a rather green lifestyle. So like this, then of course also I spoke about Ishvara Pranidhana, surrendering to the divine in my previous class, by which to practically apply it means surrendering of what? Surrendering either some of our actions or the results, some of the results of our actions to the Lord. And the Lord simply, whenever we, in the context of yoga, we speak of the Lord, we simply mean that consciousness residing within all beings. So either doing some work for all, for the benefit of humanity or the society in general, for the benefit of all living beings. Why to limit it on to humanity, but to all living beings, some work which is beneficial, or at least if we work for results, then sharing some of those results for the benefit of humanity. That is my practical understanding of Ishvara Pranidhana, surrendering to the omnipresent divinity. That is how I understand. That is what the yogic masters would call Nriyajna, worship of human beings, or Bhutayajna, worship of all living beings. And this is how the yogis from extreme antiquity, for example, the first chapati would be given to the cow, the second chapati would be given to the dog, the third chapati would be given to the birds. When you come to places like Rishikesh, you see people offering, golis, these round fish to the fish, rather than eating them, but giving them food. So that is all part of Bhuta Yajna, worshipping all beings. Even Bhuta Yajna can be as simple as pouring a little bit of water into a tree. Also that is included in Bhuta Yajna. We see this when we see the typical description of the yogis' ashrams in ancient literature. One of the first things that someone, when he enters an ashram, sees is the daughters of the yogis pouring water into the trees. That is typical description in poetry and in the plays of Sanskrit. Or then feeding soft grass to the deer, to the fawns. This is the typical description that we find. So that is what I understand as Ishvara Pranidhana, what can be referred to as Karma Yoga. That should also be part of our life. Then the masters also speak of walking, balanced walking. And can you believe back then when there were no vehicles, they were speaking of balanced walking? Then how much important it is today. And I think the only way to incorporate is to avoid vehicles as much as we can by walking on foot for the short distances and not always being dependent even just to the grocery store. And these moments, Vinobaji used to say that when the body is active completely in walking, the mind is also active. And I've seen that when I go on my walks, new inspirations come, new thoughts come. And they inspire us tremendously. It is an amazing experience. So these moments of walking when we are away from everything, and if we are completely focused and attentive and mindful in those moments, then those moments can be a tremendous source of inspiration. And I saw this, for example, as a child I used to see Swami Chidananji, the president of Shivananda Ashram, the successor of Swami Shivananji, a great master of Rishikesh. He passed away, but I remember around the world he was given on functions, on festivals, or wherever he used to travel, he was given to a great extent the same respect that we see the Dalai Lama being given today. He was tremendously respected all over the world. And a very down-to-earth and extremely, extremely humble person. Such a humble person that whenever I, my mother, and my father, we used to go and visit him, he used to touch our feet. That's how humble he was. Never ever I've come across someone this humble. And this tells nothing about our greatness. It tells about his greatness, about the greatness of someone who had millions of followers around the world. And yet that is how humble he was. And I remember him many times because my father used to go to give evening discourses in Shivananda Ashram every Wednesday. And whenever Swamiji used to be in town, many times I saw him coming on foot from his Guru Nivas up to the Samadhi hall. Just walking that distance on foot, sometimes even barefoot. And sometimes the car used to be behind him, but he would not sit into it. So that, again, just some balanced vihara, walking a little bit. The yogic masters have tremendous charaiveti, 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 move, walk, walk, walk. There are beautiful hymns in the Vedas which beautifully describe the importance and the benefits of walking, on being constantly on move. Yes.
And that old Swami was very sick in Ramashram.
Yes, yes.
In Ramashram.
Yes.
And Swami Chitananda, sometimes, can you imagine, in the night, any time, he used to come out of Guru Nivas
Yes.
and just peep into the window, into the door,
Yes.
and see if everything is okay. And sometimes 2-3 times in the night.
Yes. My friends from Italy, Adriano and Silvana,
They used to say,
they saw this. That in Hanuman Mandir,
Yeah.
next to Ramashram, in Hanuman Mandir, there was a very old Sikh Swami, and he was in his last stage of life. Many times they would see Swamiji with such a busy schedule, who was sometimes busy with satsanga till 11 p.m., till 12 p.m., and then he would reach there at 2 o'clock in the morning and spend 1 hour bringing things for him, what is required, without anybody knowing. And they would hear somebody at 2 o'clock knocking at the door, and then speaking, whispering. So one day they checked that we have to see who is it. And then they just saw the person going out. They didn't even know Swami Chidanandji. They didn't know him, So, but then when they came with us to the evening program, they recognized him. And they said, oh, he was the one who comes every day at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock early in the morning to visit that dying sadhu. So that was the kind of spirit of service that the yogis of Rishikesh had. It was the generations of such yogis who inspired the Rishikesh, a place to be since millenniums, a place where people from all over the country came and now come from all over the world to find something meaningful. So the last thing that I think all of us need to incorporate, I've spoken of tapas, I've spoken of ahimsa, I've spoken of Ishvara pranidhana, the practical aspect. The last thing, swadhyaya, self-study. If we can't do it in the morning due to our busy schedule, at least spend a few moments, half an hour, 1 hour in the evening before we go to sleep in reading some teachings which tell us not about something out there, but something about this body, something about our breath, something about our mind, something about the underlying consciousness which is supporting each one of these. Any teaching, whether we listen to it, whether we read it, but it should be something that becomes a regular part of our being. The masters are very clear that at some point all the teachings and all the scriptures have to be thrown away, and a person has to move forward, but also don't do it too early. They are instruments, they are props, they should be used. The experience of the previous teachers should be used to benefit, to widen our understanding. If it leads to narrow-mindedness, that's, I think, the only trap that is there in studying the teachings of the masters, that if it leads to narrow-mindedness, and narrow-mindedness simply means that only this is the correct path, because this is what I understand, and simply because I understand it, simply because it appeals to my logical as well as understanding, this is the only correct path. Others, that approach, that means narrow-mindedness. If it leads to narrow-mindedness, then a person has to save themselves from this pitfall. This is the one pitfall that is there with studying the scriptures. With awareness, we can always avoid. If we know where there is a ditch, we can walk around it. If we know where there is a hole, we don't fall into it. It is just a lack of awareness. If we are aware of this pitfall and we can avoid it, then we can benefit tremendously from the teachings of, I think, every master, whether it is the great yogis of India, whether it is the great masters, which can very well be referred to as yogis from any culture, from any tradition. When I read the Bible, there is so much yoga in it. When I read the Quran, when I read the Sufi teachings, there is so much yoga in it. And I benefit tremendously as an individual. Why out of my narrow-mindedness should I say that, I won't read this, if I can choose out of it what is beneficial on my journey? So this approach should be there about swadhyaya. Ultimately, whatever text we read or study, we should ask, what does it tell about me? About my body, about my breath, about my mind, about my consciousness. And if it helps me in understanding anything of this, it is wonderful. From wherever it comes. Because this has been the spirit of the yogic masters. Ano bhadraha kratavo yantu vishwataha. Let beautiful thoughts, beneficial thoughts come to us from the whole world. So with this is sort of a little bit the practical application of ahimsa, non-violence, tapas, austerity, swadhyaya, self-study, and Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to the divinity. In practical terms, if we can slowly, gradually incorporate this into our life, then I understand that we start becoming a sadhaka from an abhyasi. We start becoming a mindful practitioner from a mechanical practitioner. So with this, let us conclude today's session. Any questions? Yes?
If we say that the mind is flowing, and we say that once water are standing, they become dead.
Yes.
So what is nirodha? What is it that we need to do?
Sorry?
What is nirodha?
Nirodha is not see, that is what Patanjali discusses in the 3rd chapter when he speaks about the continuous transformation even in the deepest states of meditation. So when a person understands Patanjali's idea of deep meditation, it is not blocking the flow, it is a continuous flow. It is not a disrupted flow. Our flow is mostly disrupted. Sometimes we are with this thought, then sometimes we are with that thought. So it is a scattered flow. Sometimes flowing into this direction, then in that direction, then in that direction. His flow is a continuous and focused flow. But he doesn't speak about blocking the flow. So again, this is a detailed idea. I think when we will go through it when we reach the 2nd level of our study of the Yoga Sutras, for which we are preparing. But that's how it has to be understood. The mind never stops flowing. The wheel of the mind. Sometimes the masters present it differently. They say that meditation is not about stopping the wheel of the mind, but it is about reaching the center of that ever-moving wheel without actually stopping it. Because stopping is completely unnatural. So we have to keep this in mind whenever we try to understand the ideas related to meditation. Is that what you were asking? Yes. Still, if there are any questions, I'm here. The bigger the group, the more timid and shy everyone feels in asking questions. So it's completely fine. Let us conclude this talk, which was an offering to Guruji in his memory, in his remembrance, going back by reliving. For me, it was reliving those moments of my 3rd meeting, which I see as the most important meeting in my life. Earlier, I was maybe not prepared to fully grasp him, but this last meeting changed a lot within me. I was not the same after those few moments, and this has given me, this celebration has given me to relive those moments once again in the past few days since my last talk and now this talk. Again, to relive those inspiring moments. I hope everyone who has met him will feel the same and draw inspiration from their own personal experience that they had from Guruji, for the benefit of all beings, about which is this prayer. Oh सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। My humble salutations to you. Thank you very much.